The flashbulbs were blinding, but not as blinding as his ambition. Damien Blackwood, a man who bought and sold skylines, stood at the peak of his success. His arm was wrapped possessively around his mistress, the brilliant and beautiful Isabella, as the world watched. He felt invincible. He thought his pregnant wife Eleanor was miles away, tucked safely out of sight. He was wrong. In the split second before his empire collapsed, the music stopped. The crowd gasped, and Damien froze. Because walking into the spotlight, her hand resting on the child he had betrayed, was the one woman he never should have underestimated. The grand atrium of the Blackwood Industries headquarters was a cathedral of glass and steel tonight, transformed into a pulsing theatre of wealth. It was the launch of Odyssey Damien Blackwood's revolutionary AI platform, and the air thrummed with the energy of 500 high-profile guests and the silent, hungry gaze of the media. Damien Blackwood, 42, stalked the room with the easy confidence of a lion. He was sharp, not just in his custom Tom Ford suit, but in his eyes a glacial blue that assessed acquired and dismissed. He was the man on the cover of Forbes and Fortune, the oracle of Silicon Valley, and tonight was his coronation. By his side, a shade too close for propriety, was Isabella Vance. At 29, she was the company's new VP of strategy and a walking masterpiece of ambition. Her crimson dress was a bold statement against the room's black-tie conservative, her laughter bright and aimed exclusively at Damien. The whispers had been circulating for months. "He's shameless," one journalist muttered to another. "Eleanor isn't even showing yet, and he's already parading the replacement." "She's not just not showing," his colleague corrected. "She's not here. Supposedly ordered to rest at the Hayes family estate. How very Victorian." Damien heard none of it, or rather he chose not to. Eleanor, his wife of 3 years, was exactly where he wanted her away. Their marriage had been a merger, a brilliant consolidation of his new money tech empire and her old money political dynasty. Eleanor Hayes Blackwood was elegant, intelligent, and until recently conveniently passive. The pregnancy their first had been a surprise. He'd found her sudden morning sickness and fatigue to be an inconvenient disruption to his meticulously planned life. "Damien, darling." Isabella purred, touching his lapel as a photographer from Vanity Fair approached. "They want a shot of the team." "The team?" Damien repeated his voice, a low rumble. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He looked at Isabella, truly looked at her. She was hungry, sharp, and uncomplicated. She saw him as a god, whereas Eleanor had started looking at him like a balance sheet. He made a decision. It was subtle, a fractional shift, but it changed the atoms in the room. As the camera flash poised to strike, Damien Blackwood moved his hand from the small of Isabella's back and deliberately, possessively, wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. It was not the gesture of a boss. It was the gesture of an owner. Isabella's eyes flashed with triumph. The photographer's lens clicked, capturing the precise moment of indiscretion. And then the world stopped. The grand orchestral music, swelling through the atrium, died with the abrupt scratch of a needle. The massive 50-foot oak doors at the far end of the hall swung open. The chatter ceased, replaced by a vacuum of sudden, confused silence. 2 figures stood silhouetted against the bright lights of the lobby. As they walked forward, the spotlight, a literal spotlight meant to track Damien, swung away from him and found the new arrivals. The crowd collectively gasped. It was Eleanor Hayes Blackwood. She was not at her family's estate. She was not resting. She was dressed in an empire waist gown of the deepest sapphire velvet, a color that made her skin look like porcelain. There was no hiding her condition now. She was undeniably profoundly pregnant, her hand resting protectively on the swell of her stomach. Beside her stood her father, Senator Thomas Hayes, his face a mask of cold senatorial fury. Damien froze. His blood turned to ice water. His arm, still wrapped around Isabella, felt like a lead weight. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. Isabella's triumphant smile curdled. She tried to step away, but Damien's grip was locked in a rigor mortis of pure panic. Eleanor walked slowly, gracefully down the center of the parted crowd. She never looked at the gasping guests. She never looked at the frantic photographers now swarming her, their cameras flashing like strobe lights in a nightmare. Her eyes were fixed on one thing, and one thing only, her husband, his arm locked around another woman. She stopped 10 feet from him. The silence in the room was so total, Damien could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Eleanor looked at his arm around Isabella's waist. She looked at Isabella's terrified, guilty face. Then finally, she raised her gaze to meet Damien's. Her voice was not a shout. It was not a whisper. It was clear, calm, and cut through the silence like a diamond blade. "Hello, Damien. I believe you have something that belongs to me." The click, click, click of the cameras was like gunfire. Damien finally recoiled from Isabella, as if he'd been burned, his hand snapping back. Isabella, exposed and humiliated, looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "Eleanor!" Damien stammered, his mind, usually so quick now, a blank wall of static. I thought you were in Connecticut. You said you were resting." "I was," Eleanor replied, her voice dangerously pleasant. "I found it. Unfulfilling." She turned her gaze to Isabella, a gaze so cold it could freeze hydrogen. "Ms. Flaunts, you are an employee of this company. I suggest you find your proper place." Isabella flushed crimson. She looked to Damien for support, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Utterly dismissed, she turned, and all but fled, swallowed by the horrified crowd. Senator Hayes stepped forward, his presence radiating pure, unadulterated menace. He didn't say a word. He just looked at Damien, then at the Vanity Fair photographer, and made a slight downward gesture with his hand. The photographer lowered his camera. All the photographers lowered their cameras. Such was the power of Senator Hayes. "My daughter is feeling unwell," the senator announced to the room at large. "She came to support her husband, but the travel has been too much." He then turned to Damien. "Get her coat. We are leaving." It was not a request. The launch of Odyssey was over. The drive back to their Manhattan penthouse was a silent scream. Damien sat opposite Eleanor and his father-in-law in the back of the Maybach, the partition firmly up. The senator read a briefing on his tablet, acting as if Damien simply did not exist. Eleanor stared out the window at the passing city lights, her hand never leaving her stomach. Damien tried once. "Eleanor, you're misunderstanding what you saw. Isabella and I were just quiet." Senator Hayes said, not even looking up. Damien, a man who commanded boardrooms and terrified competitors, fell silent like a chastised child. When they arrived at the penthouse, the senator paused at the door. "I will be at the St. Regis. Eleanor, you have my private number. Call me when it's done." He looked at Damien one last time. "You have 1 hour to fix this, or I will end you. Not just your company. You." He left. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving Damien and Eleanor alone in the cavernous marble foyer. "Take off your jacket, Damien," Eleanor said, her voice echoing in the silence. She walked into the main living room, a 2-story expanse of glass overlooking Central Park. "Elle, listen," he said, following her, his confidence returning, now that the senator was gone. This was his territory. You can't just walk in and sabotage the most important night of my career. That was a PR stunt. Isabella is my VP. It was a photo. Eleanor turned, and for the first time Damien saw she was not just calm, she was furious. The control was what made it so terrifying. Was it a PR stunt 3 weeks ago in the Chicago presidential suite at the Viceroy? She asked. Damien's blood ran cold again. What? Or the strategy meeting at the bungalow in the Chateau Marmont last month? Or the client dinner at your private table at Per Se just last Tuesday? She walked to the marble bar and picked up a thick, leather-bound folder. She tossed it onto the glass coffee table. It landed with a heavy, sickening thud. I have been patient, Damien. I assumed it was a meaningless fling, a pathetic, predictable cliché. I was willing to overlook it for the sake of this family, for the sake of this. She gestured to her stomach. But when you disrespect me publicly, when you prioritize her at an event that bears my family name as well as yours, you have made a fatal error of judgment. Damien stared at the folder. You had me followed. I am Senator Hayes's daughter, Eleanor said flatly. I have had you followed since our second date. I am a realist, Damien. I knew who I was marrying. She sat down a queen on her throne and folded her hands over her unborn child. Here is what is going to happen. You have 2 options. Option A. At 9:00 a.m. tomorrow, my lawyers will file for divorce. The prenuptial agreement which my father's team drafted is ironclad. You will lose 50% of your personal assets. But that, my dear, is the least of your problems. Simultaneously, my father will exercise his authority as ranking member of the Senate Finance Committee to open a full-scale inquiry into Blackwood Industries' overseas data sourcing practices. I wonder how your Odyssey platform will fare when its proprietary algorithms are found to be built on, let's say, ethically questionable data. Damien's face went white. She knew. She knew about the shell corporations in Singapore. Your stock will be worthless by noon, Eleanor continued clinically. Your board will oust you by 5. You will be buried in litigation for a decade. I will take my half, and you will be left with a bankrupt company and a ruined name, and you will never see your child. Damien couldn't speak. He was suffocating. Or, she said, leaning forward slightly, there is option B. You will wake up tomorrow and you will fix this. You will call a car for Miss Vance. You will have security escort her from the building. You will terminate her contract with a severance package so large she will understand it is a warning. You will then issue a public statement apologizing for the confusion last night, blaming your exhaustion and overwhelming gratitude for your team for a gesture that was misinterpreted. Eleanor, I can't just fire my VP of strategy. You will, she interrupted, her voice like steel. And that is not all. At 10:00 a.m., your lawyer, Michael Sullivan, will meet you. You will be signing new corporate papers. You are transferring 51% of your voting shares in Blackwood Industries into a blind trust. What 51%? That's control of the company. Absolutely not. A blind trust. Eleanor finished ignoring him, to be managed by my father's fiduciary. Its sole beneficiary, our unborn child. You will retain your title. You will retain your salary. You will, for all public purposes, still be CEO. But I, through this trust, will have ultimate control. You will never again be in a position to jeopardize my child's legacy. You will be a king in name, Damien, but I will be the one pulling the strings. Damien sank onto the sofa opposite her. He was trapped, utterly and completely trapped. You do this, he whispered, horrified. To me, to your husband. Eleanor stood up and looked down at him, her expression devoid of pity. You did this to us. You underestimated me, Damien. You thought I was just a polite, pregnant decoration. You forgot what family I come from. We don't just endure, we win." She paused at the doorway to their separate wing. "You have until 9 a.m. to decide, option A or option B. Good night." Damien didn't sleep. He paced the 2-story living room until the sun came up the Manhattan skyline, turning from charcoal to bruised purple to a cold, sterile grey. He made one call. At 4:30 a.m., he dialed his lead counsel, Michael Sullivan. "Michael, I have a situation," he explained. He laid out the gala, the confrontation, and Eleanor's ultimatum. He expected Sullivan, his old friend and legal pit bull, to find a loophole, a counter-threat, a way out. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Michael, are you there?" "I'm here." "Damien." Sullivan's voice was heavy. I'm looking at the draft of your prenup right now, the one Senator Hayes' team drafted. And it's a goddamn fortress, Damien. It's not a prenup, it's a corporate acquisition document. The clause about moral turpitude leading to a public scandal. She's got you. And if she's right about the Singapore data, Jesus, Damien, if the senator opens an inquiry. "So I'm screwed," Damien said flatly. "You're not just screwed," Sullivan replied. "You're checkmated. Take option B. Take it and thank God she's letting you keep your title. Sign the papers. Give her the trust. At least you live to fight another day. If she files, you're done. For good." Damien hung up the phone, feeling like a brick in his hand. He was a king with a guillotine hovering over his neck, and his wife was holding the rope. At 8:15 a.m., he made the second more difficult call. Isabella Vance lived in a sleek, company-leased apartment in Tribeca. She had also not slept. She picked up on the first ring. "Damien." "Oh my God, Damien, what is happening? The press is outside my building. I've had 100 calls. You just left me there." Her voice was high and frantic. "Isabella," Damien said, his voice dead. "I'm sending a car. It will be there in 20 minutes. It's taking you to Teterboro. My private jet is waiting. It will take you anywhere you want to go. London, Paris, Zurich." A beat of silence. "What are you talking about? What about the launch? What about us?" "Us is over," Damien said, wincing at the words. "It's finished. Eleanor, she has me. Isabella, she has everything." "Finished." Isabella's voice hardened, the panic evaporating, replaced by a sharp, cold anger. "After what you promised me, you told me she was a formality. You told me you were waiting until after the launch to leave her. I built the entire strategy for Odyssey, while you used me. I'm not going to argue with you," Damien said, his patience snapping. "I'm trying to help you. Eleanor is playing for keeps. She wants you gone." "Gone? You're firing me. I'm saving you," he yelled, lowering his voice as he remembered the paper-thin walls of his own prison. "Listen to me. I've authorized a severance package, $5 million. It's being wired to your offshore account as we speak. Take the money. Take the plane. Disappear for a while. Start a new life." There was a long, terrifying pause. When Isabella spoke again, her voice was unrecognizable. It was soft, silky, and laced with pure venom. $5 million. Is that what I'm worth? Damien, the price of a penthouse renovation. You think you can buy my silence after you humiliated me in front of the entire world. Isabella, don't be stupid. Take the deal. You know, she mused, a chilling lightness in her tone. I wasn't just your VP of strategy. I was good at my job. I know everything, Damien. I know where every file is buried. I know the real numbers for Odyssey. I know about the Singapore data. And I know things you don't even know I know. A knot of dread tightened in Damien's stomach. "What are you talking about? That's classified information." It was. Now it's my severance. You wanted to throw me away? You just threw a bomb into your own engine room. What did you do, Isabella? Me, I did nothing. I'm just an unemployed woman about to go on a trip. But I have friends. Friends in the press who are very, very interested in the real story behind the Odyssey launch. Friends who want to know how Blackwood Industries built the most powerful AI in the world in just 6 months. You wouldn't, he whispered. You'd be destroying your own career. Mutually assured destruction. You destroyed my career last night when you let me stand there and take the fall, she shrieked. You don't get it, do you? I never cared about the money. I cared about the power. You promised me your world, and you took it away. Now I'm going to take away yours. Isabella, wait. The line went dead. Damien stared at his phone. He had just walked out of one trap and straight into another. He had an enraged wife with 51% of his company and a scorned mistress with 100% of his corporate secrets. At 9:58 a.m., he walked into the conference room. His suit freshly pressed his face, a mask of stone. Michael Sullivan was there, his face grim, holding a stack of documents. Eleanor was already seated at the head of the table, looking fresh and radiant. "Good morning, Damien," she said, with a bright, empty smile. "I'm so glad you decided to be reasonable. Shall we begin?" Damien Blackwood, the Oracle of Silicon Valley, picked up the pen and began to sign his kingdom away. The 2 weeks that followed were a master class in psychological warfare. Damien and Eleanor Blackwood presented a flawless, united front to the world. A carefully curated statement was released, blaming the unfortunate incident at the gala on Damien's immense stress and profound protective gratitude for his team, which was misconstrued by an overzealous press. Isabella Vance's departure was announced as a personal leave of absence, effective immediately. The $5 million sat untouched in the offshore account. She had vanished. Behind the scenes, the penthouse was a frigid hell. They lived as 2 polite Arctic strangers. They had a shared calendar for public appearances. Damien would attend Eleanor's OB/GYN appointments, sitting beside her, holding her hand, the two of them a perfect portrait of expectant joy for Dr. Lena Morgan and her staff. "Everything looks perfect, Eleanor." Dr. Morgan said, her voice warm as she reviewed the ultrasound. "The heartbeat is strong. You're doing wonderfully." "We're thrilled," Damien said, his smile feeling like cracking plaster. Eleanor just watched the fuzzy, pulsing image on the screen, her expression unreadable. Damien was a prisoner in his own life. He went to the office, he ran meetings, he made decisions, but he knew, and the board, who had been quietly informed of the new trust structure, knew that every major move was now funneled through Eleanor's fiduciary. He was a CEO in name only. He found himself looking at his wife with a new grudging and terrified respect. She was brilliant. She was ruthless. And she was carrying his child. He was much to his own disgust starting to find her power fascinating. But the other shoe had yet to drop. He waited every day for Isabella's bomb to explode. It happened on a Tuesday. Ben Carter was a reporter for the New York Sentinel, and he was not like the gossip columnists. He was a Pulitzer finalist investigative journalist who had been sniffing around Blackwood Industries' meteoric rise for a year, convinced the Odyssey project was too good to be true. He just couldn't find the proof. Until an anonymous encrypted hard drive landed on his desk. There was no note, just the drive. When he plugged it into his secure terminal, his jaw hit the floor. It was everything. Internal ledgers, falsified data logs, offshore wire transfers, and damning internal memos signed by Damien, authorizing the use of data scraping software that was not only unethical, but blatantly illegal. It was the data from Singapore. It proved unequivocally that Odyssey was a fraud, a house of cards built on stolen information. Isabella had been meticulous. She hadn't just copied the files. She had curated a narrative highlighting Damien's specific culpability. Ben Carter worked for 48 hours straight, his article Blackwood's Odyssey, a voyage built on lies, dropped at 5:00 a.m. on Wednesday. It didn't just allege fraud, it proved it with copies of the internal documents. It was a kill shot. By 6:00 a.m., Blackwood Industries' stock was in freefall in pre-market trading. By 7:00 a.m., the board had called an emergency meeting. By 8:00 a.m., Damien was in his office, watching his life's work disintegrate in real time, the stock ticker on his screen a waterfall of red. Eleanor walked into his office, not in her usual pristine dress, but in a severe business suit, tailored to accommodate her pregnancy. She held a tablet displaying Carter's article. "You absolute unmitigated fool," she said, her voice shaking with a rage he had never heard. "This isn't just about you anymore. You didn't just cheat on me. You didn't just humiliate me. You have defrauded our investors and implicated my family name in a federal crime. I can fix this, Elle. It's a smear campaign. It's Isabella. She's twisting—" "Save it," Eleanor snapped. "My father is on his way. The SEC is launching a formal investigation. The board meeting is in 1 hour. They are going to vote to oust you, Damien. And this time there is no option B." Damien stared at her. "Oust me? But you control the trust. You have the 51%. I do," Eleanor said, her eyes like chips of ice. "And I will be voting with them. I will not allow my child to inherit a criminal enterprise. You are a liability, Damien, and I am here to cut you loose." He was finished. He had lost his wife, his mistress, and now finally his company. But Isabella wasn't done. Just as Damien was about to protest, Eleanor's personal assistant, a nervous young woman named Chloe, burst in. "Mrs. Blackwood, Mr. Blackwood, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." She turned the television in Damien's office to a cable news network. It wasn't about the stock crash. It was breaking news. A new scandalous twist in the Blackwood Industries implosion, the anchorwoman said, her face grim. Sources close to the company are now alleging that the real reason for the conflict between Damien Blackwood and his wife is the paternity of their unborn child. A new headline blared across the screen, "Blackwood air a lie." An anonymous source. The anchor continued, has provided emails to the Sentinel suggesting Damien Blackwood himself confided in a close associate that he had serious doubts the child was his. Is this a story of corporate fraud or a dark domestic drama? Damien and Eleanor stared at the screen in mute horror. This wasn't just an attack on Damien. This was an attack on Eleanor. Isabella, it turned out, had saved her most cruel and brilliant weapon for last. She hadn't just aimed at his company. She had aimed at his wife's honor and the legitimacy of his only heir. The penthouse, once a symbol of his power, now felt like a tomb. The emergency board meeting was in less than an hour. The world was watching them bleed. Eleanor was pale, her hand on her stomach, her usual composure fractured. She was staring at the television, where a family law expert was now dissecting the Blackwood prenup. If the child is not his, the expert opined, it could invalidate the trust call into question Mrs. Blackwood's claims and completely change the divorce proceedings. She's lying, Eleanor whispered, her voice sounding small for the first time. She fabricated those emails. Damien, seeing her vulnerability, felt a surge of something. Not love, not pity, but rage. His name was being dragged through the mud. His legacy was being questioned. "How dare she?" he snarled. "How dare that bitch?" He paced the room, his mind racing. She's trying to nullify the trust. She's trying to create so much chaos that the board has no choice but to liquidate. She's burning the whole kingdom down. Then a dark, insidious thought, born from his own betrayal, wormed its way into his mind. He looked at Eleanor. He looked at her cold, calculated calm over the past few weeks. He looked at her immediate, ruthless takeover of his company. She had a PI on me from our second date. She was so calm at the gala. So prepared. What if... Damien. Eleanor said, her voice sharp, pulling him from his thoughts. This is a distraction. The paternity is a lie. The fraud is the real problem. We have to... Is it? He interrupted, his voice, low and dangerous. Eleanor's head snapped up. What did you just say? This child, he said, walking slowly towards her. You've been so cold, so calculating. You had this all planned, didn't you? The takedown, the trust. You were just waiting for me to make a mistake. I was prepared for you to make a mistake, she corrected him, her eyes narrowing. How prepared, Eleanor, were you? So sure this baby was your leverage, or was it? Was it someone else's? The sound of the slap echoed through the vast, empty room. Eleanor's handprint was stark red against his cheek. Her chest was heaving, not with cold rage, but with a hot, visceral fury. You filthy, pathetic coward, she spat. You sleep with half of New York. You humiliate me in front of the world. You destroy our company with your criminal arrogance. And now you dare to stand there and question me. You're not denying it, Damien yelled, holding his cheek. I will not dignify this. This is exactly what she wants. She wants us to destroy each other while she escapes. Or maybe Damien shot back his paranoia now in full bloom. You were working with her. Maybe you both wanted me out. You get the company she gets. What her revenge? You're insane, Eleanor whispered, backing away from him, a new look in her eye. Fear. Not of him, but of how far he was unraveling. The intercom buzzed. It was Chloe, his assistant, her voice trembling. Mr. Blackwood. The board is assembled. And, sir, your father-in-law, Senator Hayes, is here. He's in the main conference room. They're waiting for you. Damien looked at Eleanor. Her face was a mask of betrayal. The slap, the accusation, it had broken something between them. The Cold War was over. This was total war. Fine, Damien said, straightening his tie. The red mark on his face, a badge of his own desperate suspicion. Let's go. Let's go and see who's really telling the truth. Let's put it all on the table. Damien. No, Eleanor said, grabbing his arm. Don't. This is what Isabella wants. Fight the fraud, not me. It's all the same fight now, Eleanor, he said, ripping his arm from her grasp. May the best liar win. He stormed out of the penthouse, leaving her alone, her hand on her stomach, as the full weight of what he had just done settled on her. He hadn't just believed the tabloids. He had accused his pregnant wife, the one person who hadn't leaked his secrets of the ultimate betrayal. He was walking into the boardroom to save his company. He didn't realize he had just handed Isabella Vance her final, complete victory. The Blackwood Industries boardroom was 50 stories in the air, a glass box of judgment. The long mahogany table was full. The board members, grim-faced, stared at him as he entered. At the head of the table sat Senator Thomas Hayes, his face carved from granite. Damien, the senator said, his voice a low growl that filled the room. You have disgraced my daughter. You have endangered this company, and you have made a fool of my family. The board has reviewed Mr. Carter's article. We have seen the leaked documents. We are here to vote on your immediate termination." "You can't," Damien said, his voice slick with a desperate false confidence. "This is a setup, a smear campaign by a disgruntled ex-employee, Isabella Vance. She fabricated those documents. We have had our forensics team analyze them." A board member, an older woman named Judith, replied. "They're real, Damien. The timestamps, the server logs. They are real." She's lying," Damien insisted, his mind grasping at straws. She's trying to destroy me. She even leaked a story that the baby, that Eleanor's baby, isn't mine. She is an unstable, vengeful woman." Senator Hayes's eyes narrowed to slits. "What did you just say?" "He's right," a new voice said. Every head turned. The boardroom doors opened, and Eleanor Blackwood walked in. She was not the weeping victim Damien had left upstairs. She was the Ice Queen returned, composed, regal, and holding a new slim briefcase. "She is lying," Eleanor said, walking to the head of the table and standing beside her father. "Isabella Vance has been feeding a steady stream of lies to the press to mask her own crimes." Damien stared at her, confused. "Eleanor, what are you doing?" "What I should have done from the beginning," she said, her eyes never leaving the board. "I am here to save my child's company." She opened her briefcase and connected a drive to the main console. The 80-inch screen at the end of the room lit up. "You are all correct," Eleanor began, her voice commanding. "The Odyssey data is fraudulent. The Singapore documents are real. Damien's signature is on them. He is guilty of criminal negligence and profound arrogance." Damien felt the floor drop out. "Eleanor, you're siding with them." "I'm siding with the truth," she snapped. "But you are only seeing half of it. Damien was a fool. He was arrogant. But he wasn't the architect of the fraud." She clicked a button. A new set of documents appeared on the screen. Financial statements, offshore account numbers. Isabella Vance wasn't just a VP, and she wasn't just a mistress. For the last 18 months, she has been a paid mole for our primary competitor, KinetiQ Solutions. The room gasped. "My private investigator," Eleanor continued, "the one Damien is so fond of, didn't just track his pathetic affair. He tracked her. When Isabella was promoted to VP of Strategy, she began a systematic campaign of corporate espionage. She didn't just leak the Singapore data. She created it. She and a team at KinetiQ fabricated the data, fabricated the logs, and fabricated the transfer authorizations. She then, knowing Damien's ego, had him sign off on the final authorizations, burying them in a 200-page approval docket he never bothered to read. She pointed to the screen. Isabella wasn't trying to build Odyssey. She was building the world's most expensive corporate sabotage. Damien was speechless. He hadn't been arrogant. He had been played. Her plan, Eleanor explained, was to get Damien to leave me for her. Once she was Mrs. Blackwood, she and KinetiQ would expose the fraud she created, buy Blackwood Industries for pennies on the dollar during the bankruptcy, and install her as the new CEO. A complete hostile takeover from the inside. But Damien dumped her. Judith, the board member, whispered, connecting the dots. At the gala. Precisely, Eleanor said. When he dumped her, she pivoted. If she couldn't take the company, she would burn it. She leaked the documents to Ben Carter to destroy Damien, and leaked the paternity lie to destroy me, the holder of the 51% trust. A board member shook his head. This is insane. How did she get him to sign those papers? How did she get past legal? Damien's head snapped up. Legal? Michael Sullivan. Eleanor's face tightened. Mr. Sullivan, our chief counsel, who advised Damien to take option B, who advised him to sign away his shares, who knew every single loophole. She clicked to the final slide. It was a photo, a grainy long lens shot from her PI. It wasn't of Damien. It was of Isabella Vance, kissing a man on the steps of a discreet brownstone. The man was Michael Sullivan. It wasn't just Isabella, Eleanor said quietly. They were in it together. He was her inside man guiding Damien, ensuring the legal framework was in place for a takeover. When that failed, he helped her plan the leak covering their tracks. Senator Hayes, who had been listening in stunned silence, finally spoke. He pulled out his phone and pressed a number. "Get me the Attorney General, and get a team to the St. Regis. There's a lawyer named Michael Sullivan registered there. Hold him." The game was over. The chaos that erupted in the boardroom was immediate and absolute. Board members were on their feet, shouting into phones. The company's general counsel, a man Eleanor had vetted personally, was already huddling with Senator Hayes, dictating the framework of the injunction against Kinetic Solutions. "Get the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District on the line." Senator Hayes commanded his voice, cutting through the din like a cannon. "I want a multi-agency task force, SEC FBI. I want warrants for Michael Sullivan and Isabella Vance. Freeze their assets, all of them, and get a team to Kinetic's headquarters. I want their servers seized by nightfall." Damien just sat there, a ghost at the head of the table. He was a king in checkmate, saved only because a different player had overturned the entire board. The other members looked at him, their expressions a mixture of profound relief for the company and utter undiluted contempt for him. "You brought this plague into our house." "Damien." Judith, the oldest board member, said, her voice dripping with scorn. "You were so busy thinking with your ego, you almost destroyed us all." Damien had no reply. He had been played, not just by his wife, but by his mistress, by his lawyer. He wasn't a predator. He was the bait. The realization was a colder, deeper humiliation than any he had ever known. Eleanor, poised as ever, gathered her slim briefcase. She didn't look at Damien. She addressed the room. "My father and I will handle the external communications. A press release will be drafted by 3 p.m., naming Kinetic and announcing the immediate termination of Ms. Vance and Mr. Sullivan. Judith, I want you to coordinate the internal audit. We need to know exactly how deep this rot went." "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood," Judith said, her tone shifting to one of deep respect. "Go home, Eleanor," Senator Hayes said, his voice softening for the first time as he looked at his daughter. "You've done more than enough. You need to rest." Eleanor nodded her face, showing the first signs of a deep, bone-weary fatigue. She turned and walked toward the door, her heels clicking on the marble. Damien jolted from his stupor, scrambled to follow her, a forgotten shadow trailing in her wake. He caught the elevator, just as the doors were sliding shut, sealing them inside the plush, silent box. They descended 50 floors in an atmosphere so heavy it was hard to breathe. The only sound was the faint electronic whir of the motor. Damien stared at his wife's reflection in the mirrored steel. She was magnificent. She was terrifying. And she had saved him. That one thought was a desperate, flickering candle in the wreckage of his mind. She saved him. She had the proof. She could have let him burn. She could have let the fraud conviction stand, taken her 51% of the bankrupt ruins, and left him in a federal prison. But she didn't. She chose him. She chose them. The spark of hope began to build into a desperate, delusional fire. Maybe this was it. The ultimate trial by fire. He had been tested, found wanting, and she, his queen, had intervened. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice hoarse. Her hand came up, palm out, in a sharp, brutal gesture. It didn't waver. It simply said, "Silence." He obeyed. He was a dog that had been shown the leash. The ding of the elevator, arriving at their penthouse floor, sounded like a death knell. She walked into the cavernous marble foyer. The late afternoon sun streamed through the 2-story windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The silence was absolute. Damien finally broke it, his voice wrong, too eager, too bright. "Eleanor, my God, you were brilliant, utterly brilliant. You saved us. I can't believe. All this time you knew. You saved the company." Eleanor slowly walked to the bar, not for a drink, but to put a barrier between them. She leaned against the cool marble, her arms crossed over her stomach. "I saved my company, Damien." She corrected her voice. Quiet, yet it filled the massive room with its chilling finality. "What to know?" he said, taking a step closer, a desperate salesman's smile plastered on his face. "Our company. You defended me in that boardroom. You cleared my name." She laughed. It was not a sound of humor. It was a cold, sharp, brittle sound, like glass breaking. "Cleared your name," she repeated, pushing off the bar. "Damien, I just painted a room full of sharks, a detailed, documented portrait of your staggering incompetence. I proved you were not a criminal mastermind, but a fool. A vain, arrogant, preening fool who was so blinded by his own ego and a pretty face that he signed away his kingdom without reading the fine print. I didn't save you. I saved the stock price." He flinched, as if she had struck him again. "But why, after everything I did, after what I said this morning?" The memory of his accusation, vile and paranoid, hung between them. I don't understand." "You're right," she said, walking slowly towards him. "You accused me of the one thing that would have destroyed me just to save yourself. You believed a tabloid smear planted by your mistress over your own wife. You stood in this very room and called your own child a lie." She stopped just out of his reach. "That was the moment I knew Damien. Not at the gala. Not when I read the first PI report. This morning, when you showed me the depths of your cowardice. That was when you signed your own execution warrant." "Then why?" he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Why not let me burn? Why not let the company go down? You could have taken your 51% of the ashes and been free of me. Because he," she said, placing both hands on the full swell of her stomach, "deserves more than ashes. This isn't about you, Damien. It has never been about you. This is about him. It's about the Blackwood Hayes legacy. I saved this company for my son." Damien's desperate mind latched onto the only word that mattered. "Our son." He corrected his voice, thick with a new frantic hope. "He's our son. Eleanor, that was the lie. The paternity. I know he's mine. I always knew it." "Did you?" She cut him off, her voice like ice. "Because this morning you seemed quite convinced otherwise. I couldn't afford to have your doubt, Damien. I couldn't risk a protracted public custody battle based on your paranoid delusions. I couldn't let him be your pawn. So yes, I had a test done." His blood ran cold. "A test. When?" 2 weeks ago. Your whiskey glass from the study. My private investigator is very thorough. I received the results the day before Isabella's pathetic little leak." She walked to the briefcase she had set down by the door, opened it, and pulled out a single folded paper. She didn't hand it to him. She slid it across the glass coffee table like a treaty. He snatched it, his hands shaking. His eyes scanned the document, blurring over the scientific jargon until they locked on the one line that mattered. Probability of paternity 99.99%. A wave of relief so profound it was sickening washed over him. He staggered, sinking onto the plush sofa. He's mine. He's really mine." He looked up at her. his eyes shining with tears, his face a mask of pathetic, desperate hope. This was it. This was the key. "Eleanor," he whispered, scrambling from the sofa to his knees in front of her. "Thank God. We can fix this. This is a second chance. It's a sign. I've learned my lesson, I swear to God I have." He reached for her hands. "I will never look at another woman. I will dedicate my life to you. To him. To our family. Please, Elle. I know what I am. I'm a fool. I'm an arrogant idiot. But I can be your fool. We can start over." She looked down at the man kneeling at her feet, and for a long moment she felt nothing but a vast, empty pity. She pulled her hands away, stepping back as if he were something unclean. No. The word was not loud, it was not angry, it was absolute. "But the baby," he stammered, his hope curdling into panic. "Our son, he needs a father. I love you, Eleanor. I realize that now. I love your strength, your mind. I love you. You love my power," she said, her voice devoid of all emotion. "You love that I saved you. You are a man who can only love what he fears or what benefits him. You don't love me, Damien. You just lost your mistress, your best friend, and your company in the span of 3 hours. You're just desperate for an ally." "That's not true," he cried. "It's the truest thing I've ever said. And my son doesn't need a father like you. He needs a provider and a protector. I will be both. You will be an annuity." What are you saying?" he whispered, rising to his feet, the dread finally truly setting in. "I'm saying you're free, Damien," she said, turning her back on him to look out at the city. Her city. "The board has accepted your resignation, which I tendered on your behalf this morning while you were in the shower. You fired me. I excused you. Your golden parachute, as stipulated in our prenup, is substantial. Your personal assets are untouched. This penthouse, however, is in my name. You will have until the end of the week to have your things moved." She turned back her face, a mask of calm, corporate control. "Go to London. Go back to Singapore. Go find another woman to ruin. But you are finished with Blackwood Industries. And you are finished with me. My son," he said the words a hollow croak. You can't take my son from me." "I won't," she said. "He is your blood. You will have visitation rights. Supervised, of course. My security team will arrange the schedule. You will never be alone with him. You will be a guest in his life, Damien. A distant biological fact. But you will never be his father. Not in any way that matters." He stared at her, the architect of his salvation and his ruin. He saw it all now. He had wrapped his arms around Isabella in the spotlight, and his wife had stepped out of the shadows. But she wasn't just stepping into the light. She was stepping onto a stage she had built, in a play she had written, and he was the only one who didn't know he was the villain. He had lost. He hadn't just lost his company. He had lost everything. As this final, crushing silence stretched, sealing his fate, Eleanor made a sound. A sharp, sudden, involuntary gasp. She gripped the back of the sofa, her knuckles turning white. Her other hand flew to her stomach. "Eleanor!" Damien said, his voice small, rising in a new, unfamiliar panic. "What is it? Are you okay?" She turned, and the mask of the CEO was gone. The Ice Queen had vanished. Her face was pale, her brow furrowed, her entire body clenched in a new immediate focus. "It's time," she breathed the words tight. Time for what?" She looked up at him, and her eyes, though tight with the first wave of pain, were clear-focused and utterly devoid of any need for him. Call the car, Damien. Not your car. My driver. Tell him we're going to Lenox Hill. Now. Now, he stammered. Are you sure? Get the phone. Damien. He scrambled, fumbling for his phone, like a useless, dismissed assistant, his hands shaking. He was a non-entity in his own home, a ghost at the birth of his own son. Eleanor leaned her head back, closing her eyes, breathing through the powerful contraction. She was in pain, but she was in complete and total control. She opened her eyes and looked at the shell of the man who was once her husband, the real heir. She said, a small, tight, triumphant smile playing on her lips. He's arriving. The battle was over, but the war for the Blackwood legacy has just begun. Eleanor may have won the company, but can she truly escape the shadow of the man she defeated? And what happens when a man like Damien Blackwood, with nothing left to lose, decides he wants his son back? If you were hooked by this story, you won't believe what happens next. We spend weeks writing these complex, real-life dramas just for you. Please take 1 second to support our channel. It makes a huge difference. Click that like button, share this video with someone else who loves a good story. And most importantly, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. You won't want to miss the next chapter in this gripping saga. Let us know in the comments, do you think Eleanor was right, or was her revenge too cold? We read every single comment. See you in the next one.